Hello everyone, it's me again. Today I will recap the movie Roadhouse. Do you see the six-pack guy? He has solid muscles on his body. Dalton used to be the most famous middleweight MMA fighter in the world. Because he was too enthusiastic about fighting, he accidentally killed his opponent. So now he has lost career and then work as a security guard in a bar. However, the gangsters came to his workplace to cause trouble, making him angry. So what will be the ending for these ignorant people? Please follow today's recap. In an illegal black market fighting ring in a remote town, the crowd enthusiastically cheered for the fighter they bet on. The two fighters rushed into each other without missing a beat. After a fierce fight, this fat tattooed fighter was the winner. He is known as the king here with a record of 6 consecutive matches without losing. At this moment, a mysterious man wearing a hoodie walked over and wanted to challenge the fat fighter. At first, he was still proud and underestimated. However, his smile quickly disappeared when he saw Dalton take off his shirt. He immediately showed fear. He told the referee that he would not fight Dalton. After saying that, the fat fighter quickly ran away. The crowd was disappointed because Dalton's opponent had given up. So he became the winner and received his bet. On his way out, Dalton was stopped by a guy who unexpectedly stabbed Dalton with a knife because Dalton had made him lose $500 in the bet. But Dalton didn't care. Dalton's indifferent attitude scared the young men away. Dalton dejectedly returned to his car to find first aid supplies. At this time, a beautiful girl came to meet him. She introduced herself as Frankie. She said that she owned a bar in Florida, but recently, some thugs kept coming to the bar to cause trouble and destroy things. So she wanted to hire Dalton to be a security guard at the bar. She would pay him $5,000 a week. This was quite a sum, but Dalton wasn't very interested in money, so he refused. Frankie didn't give up and left her business card, saying that if he changed his mind, he could contact her again. In the past, Dalton was the world's #1 middleweight MMA fighter, known as the Undefeated One. But in one match, because he lost control, he beat his opponent to death. Because of that event, he was psychologically haunted, could not compete anymore, and decided to retire. Unable to find a purpose in life, Dalton drove aimlessly. Finally, he stopped right in the middle of the train tracks, as if he wanted to end all his suffering. However, after the collision, he was still safe and sound. Dalton smiled and thought that he still had some meaning in life. So the next morning, he took a bus to a Florida town, wanting to accept the job that Frankie offered, and he also start a new life. As soon as he arrived, he met a bookseller named Charlie. She was very cute, enthusiastically introduced Dalton to this town, and also gave him a book as a souvenir. The first time he came to a remote town and was warmly welcomed, he felt very warm about the people here. With Charlie's guidance, Dalton also found the place he needed to go, which was a beach bar called Roadhouse. The scenery here was very pleasant. The staff in the bar were all cheerful and friendly. At first glance it looked very peaceful and not too bad. However, at night, it was the complete opposite. The guests who had a little bit of alcohol started fighting each other without stopping. The waiter was punched in the eye by them for trying to stop thugs. But that didn't stop there. A group of young men from the town also appeared. They smashed things, threatened the customers in the restaurant. They also teased the female staff. Dalton saw that and went to teach them a lesson. He advised them gently, but none of them listened. They also relied on their strength in numbers. So Dalton called these young men outside. Dalton asked them if the motorbike outside was theirs. Immediately, they followed Dalton outside. The leader wanted to bully Dalton, but Dalton kept mocking them. The tattooed men were furious when they saw Dalton mocking them, but they didn't dare to do anything because he was so fierce. The employees in the restaurant also went out to see what was going on. Dalton gave the leader a thunderous slap in the face. His subordinates couldn't avoid being slapped either. Dalton's attack speed was too fast and dangerous. They basically couldn't touch a single hair on him. Dalton quickly defeated all the tattooed men. Feeling sorry for they, Dalton borrowed a car to take them to the emergency room. One of them even thanked him for taking them to the hospital. The nurse asked him if he was their relative. He replied that he had beaten them. The nurse was silent after hearing that, not knowing how to respond. When he was about to leave, a female doctor on duty called him back. Her name was Ellie, the head of the emergency department of this hospital. Ellie realized that Dalton wasn't from town, so she wondered why someone would beat someone up and then take them to the hospital. Looking closely, she saw that he was injured, so she helped him treat the wound on his hip. When he returned to the bar, Frankie gave Dalton an envelope containing $5,000 in cash as an advance payment for the new week's salary. On the first day of work, he had beaten up those thugs, so she was very pleased. She hoped that Dalton would bring peace to this place. Not only that, Frankie was kind enough to lend Dalton her great-grandfather's boat so that he could have a temporary place to stay, and also reminded him that there was an alligator in the river. Dalton slept straight through until morning, when he was suddenly awakened by the bartender at the bar. Because she was afraid that Dalton was new to town and unfamiliar with the place, she took the initiative to bring him breakfast. The bartender said that she was very impressed with what happened last night. Before him, there were 4 people who had worked as security guards here, but none of them could last more than 2 days. He was a fragile hope for this place. After a full of drinking and eating, Dalton walked around town. Strangely, after a night, everyone seemed to know his name, and everyone he met waved warmly. He went to use the computer at Charlie's bookstore. At this time, the gangsters came to cause trouble and make a scene outside. Charlie took a baseball bat and rushed out to chase them away. When they saw Dalton's face, they were scared and ran away. On a yacht offshore, this young master named Brant was the son of a famous boss here. His father assigned him to take over all the family's illegal businesses. Because he wanted to take over Frankie's bar to build a luxurious 5-star resort, this guy sent those thugs to cause trouble to put pressure on her. When he heard that a strange security guard had beaten up a few of his underlings, he was furious and shouted loudly that by all means, his henchmen must deal with that security guard. He couldn't let that security guard ruin his plan. Since Dalton arrived, the bar had become much more peaceful. Although there were drunk customers causing trouble every day, under his direction, everything was resolved smoothly. Dalton also taught the 2 bar staff some martial arts, so that when he wasn't around, the bar would still be safe. Even those who got too drunk were chased away. As for the thugs, they only dared to stand outside the shop and not dare to come in to cause trouble. But this was just the calm before the storm. One day Dalton met Dr. Ellie, and the two got along very well. They talked happily all afternoon. One evening, Dalton was walking home alone when suddenly a car rushed forward and knocked him aside. It didn't stop. It even tried to back up very quickly. Luckily, Dalton jumped into the car in time, otherwise he would have been crushed. But in the end, he fell into the river. The car then fell, and luckily he escaped death. When Dalton returned to the boat, he met the leader of the thugs from the day before, who had been waiting with a gun. But Dalton was still very calm. He took advantage of the moment when the leader wasn't concentrating and rushed in to attack. During the struggle, the thug was thrown into the river. Although still underwater, the thug still threatened that after escaping, he would bring his men to kill Dalton. Before he could climb up, a crocodile appeared. Dalton wanted to save him, but couldn't. As a result, the young gangster became a delicious dinner for the crocodile. The police had to mobilize people to search the entire river, but still couldn't find the body. Perhaps the crocodile had hidden a prey in its den. This was considered an unexpected accident, so Dalton didn't have to take any responsibility. One day while walking, Dalton encountered one of Brant's men. He brought out a weapon to threaten, telling Dalton to get in the car, because his boss wanted to talk to Dalton. But Dalton calmly approached and gently broke the other guy's index finger, causing him to lie down on the ground in pain. Dalton said that the henchman had threatened the wrong person and told the henchman to tell his boss that Dalton was not afraid of anyone. Returning to the bar, Dalton went to see Frankie. He wanted to ask clearly why Brant insisted on sending people to cause trouble here. Frankie did not dare to hide anything, answering that Brant wanted to destroy this bar to build a resort. But that was just a cover. His plan was to build a place to conveniently transport and trade drugs by sea. Since this bar has been in Frankie's family for generations, it's obvious she can't agree to Brant taking over. Transition: a guy was having an affair with another man's wife. When her husband caught him red-handed, the husband chased after the guy so that he did not have time to put on his clothes. His name was Knox. He was so crazy that he even robbed the clothes of the people in the market, then burned down the stall. While he was walking, Knox received a call from the boss, saying that his son had messed up and needed him to come to Florida to help. Back to the main character, the Dr. Ellie took the opportunity to take a day off from work to drive a boat to find Dalton. She wanted to ask him out on a date. The two of them went to a sandbar in the middle of the sea, set up a chair, and drank a few beers. Ellie said that Brant was the son of the boss here, and it was best not to get involved. After chatting about everything in the world, whatever comes will come, Ellie and Dalton kissed passionately in the middle of the blue sea. At Brant's base, when Brant just arrived at the house, he saw Knox lying on a sun lounger. After greeting, Knox gave Brant a loving punch as a meeting gift. Knox said that Brant's father asked him to come here to help. Knox is a world-famous MMA fighter in real life, and this is his first movie. Dalton, After just finishing a fun trip with Frankie, he was visited by two policemen. They invited him to the police station to clarify some matters, but they did not take him to the police station, but went straight to a pier. Then a man claiming to be the sheriff appeared. He demanded that Dalton leave this town immediately, or else he would suffer the consequences. But Dalton was not the type to be bullied. Not only that, he also mocked the sheriff. So the sheriff angrily dragged Dalton out of the car and beat him. The sheriff pulled out his pistol and was about to shoot. At the dangerous moment, Ellie suddenly appeared. She went to slap him, then led Dalton away. Ellie said that the sheriff was her father. He was a lackey for Brant's family. She had lived with her mother since she was young, but after she passed away, she had no contact with him anymore. She also advised Dalton to leave this town. Getting involved with Brant's family would sooner or later cost him dearly. Dalton thought he had found a peaceful place to continue living a new life. But who would have thought that God would like to tease people like this? Outside the bookstore, Brant's men were ordered to bring gasoline cans to set fire to the place. The father and son were helpless and could do nothing. This was Brant's warning to Dalton. Dalton returned to the bar dejectedly, his mind filled with uncertain thoughts. Unexpectedly, Brant came and sat next to Dalton and started talking to him. He tried to convince Dalton not to cause trouble. Brant showed Dalton a video of his old match. At that time he had lost control like a wild beast, nothing more, nothing less. Seeing that he did not respond, Brant angrily left. At this moment, Knox led a group of thugs in, brazenly smashing everything around. The two waiters who tried to stop him were also beaten to a pulp. The atmosphere in the bar was now very chaotic. Everyone was like crazy, rushing in and butting each other. Dalton had been sitting there thinking about life, but seeing that things had gone too far, he couldn't bear it any longer. He approached Knox, and without saying much to each other, they immediately jumped at each other without missing a beat. They continuously exchanged blows. Knox was truly not an ordinary person. He kept using his deadly moves, making Dalton struggle. But Knox soon realized that Dalton wasn't fighting at full strength. Because Dalton had just gone through so many things, he was in no mood to fight anymore. So he turned around and left, determined to leave this town of trouble. Dalton returned to the boathouse to treat his wounds. Frankie also ran over to beg him to stay, but he no longer cared about this place. On his way to the bus station to catch a bus to leave, Dalton saw the bookseller's shop burned down. He rushed in to check, but the people there said that Charlie and her father were being taken to the emergency room by ambulance. It was obvious that this was caused by that scoundrel's men. In this town, Charlie was the kindest person to Dalton. So when he learned that those scoundrels had harmed her, he was extremely angry. Dalton went to Brant's base alone. When he arrived, he only saw one of Brant's henchmen there. He approached and punched the opponent in the throat. Dalton asked him that, "He broke your throat, now you feel like you can't breathe, right?" And the henchman couldn't breathe and fell into the swimming pool. Dalton found another henchman, who was scared and said that Brant had used his connections to borrow a large sum of money to serve his plan, and that the money would be transferred early tomorrow morning. Based on the information he had just obtained, Dalton secretly followed, and indeed a helicopter carrying a box of money flew in. Then, a policeman dragged it away to hand it over to Brant. Dalton quickly knocked policeman out and stole the dirty money. He used the corpse of the thug from the day before, used the policeman's gun to shoot the corpse, creating a scene where the police shot and killed civilians. And the amount of money that Brant had was indeed not small. In his head, Dalton had already come up with a plan to destroy Brant's plan. Dalton was sitting on the boat wrapping sticks of dynamite when the sheriff approached him. He informed Dalton that Brant was aware he had stolen his money. As a result, Brant had kidnapped Ellie to hold her hostage. Brant threatened to harm Ellie if Dalton did not return the money by noon. The sheriff asked Dalton to save his daughter. Of course, Ellie was in danger, so Dalton could not just stand by and watch. Dalton borrowed a boat from the dock and immediately set off. Knox still drove back to Brant's place. But when he got there, no one was there. It was clear that Brant had tricked him. When Dalton arrived, he saw Brant and the sheriff waiting, but the negotiation did not seem to go smoothly. Dalton demanded that he see Ellie before handing over the money. Brant, on the other hand, refused to agree, only releasing Ellie when he saw the money. Dalton wondered why Ellie's father was sitting so leisurely. At this time, Brant said that he had really kidnapped Ellie. The sheriff was so angry that he almost went crazy. While the atmosphere was tense, Dalton pressed his remote control. The boat suddenly exploded. He then took the opportunity to look for Ellie. Because of the explosion, Brant's yacht was also flooded, and it would sink sooner or later. Dalton found Ellie using a fire extinguisher to hit the glass door when a gunman was about to pull the trigger. Luckily, the glass broke and they swam up. As for the remaining young men, Dalton fed them seawater. With great difficulty, Ellie was rescued. But when she climbed onto another small boat, Brant grabbed her and kidnapped her. Here, Knox drove a canoe over. Dalton cleverly used a thug to shield him. Dalton had a hard time climbing onto Knox's canoe. This crazy guy was about to throw a chain at Dalton. Taking advantage of Knox's carelessness, Dalton knocked him flying, and he fell headfirst into the water. Then, he steered the canoe at full speed to save Ellie. Brant recklessly turned the boat around and wanted to hit Dalton straight. But with his agile body, at the exact moment of collision, he jumped up and grabbed onto Brant's boat. Ellie couldn't hold back anymore and punched this guy in the face. He was about to use brute force when Dalton blocked him. Dalton kicked him painfully. When he looked back, the boat was about to hit the bar. Dalton and Ellie quickly jumped into the water, but Brant didn't have time to jump, so he was thrown and landed on the roof of the bar. On the other side, Knox also swam to the foot of the bridge. He climbed up to block a car's path. Dalton went up and was shot by Brant with a hook gun. So Dalton rushed over to teach him a lesson. Brant was scared and tried to crawl away. Suddenly, a car rushed into the shop. It was Knox. Seeing him appear, Dalton did not hesitate but immediately rushed in and tackled him. This time it was truly a life-and-death battle. Everyone wanted to quickly finish off the opponent. There were consecutive tit-for-tat attacks. Every punch was solid, fast, strong and decisive. Dalton circled behind to use it to clamp his opponent's neck. Knox counterattacked, pushed Dalton hard, then carried Dalton and threw him down. At this moment, Knox picked up a wooden stick from the floor and stabbed Dalton hard. Right when he was about to finish off Dalton, Brant appeared from nowhere and demanded to kill Dalton himself. Knox immediately twisted Brant's neck and sent him to meet God. Next, Knox picked up another wooden stick and ended it all. Dalton blocked the attack and then pulled out a wooden stick from his body and stabbed it into Knox, causing him to fall. Ellie entered and saw this scene. She was in panicking. The sheriff waited until everything was done and appeared. He told Dalton to leave this place. He would consider this an accident and considering this as a thank you for saving Ellie. At the end of the movie, Dalton decided to leave this town. As for the money he took from Brant, he left it to Charlie and her father. Just as the father was about to say thank you, Dalton left this place. Knox was still alive and left the hospital. That's the end of the movie. If you find it interesting, please give me a like and a comment about this movie. Especially, please subscribe to the channel to follow my Recap the Movie recap. See you again, my dear friends.